All right. So welcome everybody. This is a very special panel discussion today. We're excited to have a large room of folks with us, really. This is a great group, and it's an exciting collaboration that we'll be talking about throughout the course of the next roughly an hour that we'll be together. So first and foremost, we want to welcome you to the space. I'm Anthony Allen. I'm the Ecological Communications Specialist at Save the Sound. For those of you who are less familiar or unfamiliar with Save the Sound's work, we are the regional leader in environmental action in the Long Island Sound region. We do a lot of different things. We fight climate change and we lead climate change advocacy. We protect Long Island Sound and its rivers. We fight for the conservation and protection of threatened lands, and we work hands-on in the ecosystems that surround our waters and our lands, and that make them up to restore them back to health, really getting out of their way and letting nature take its regenerative course. So that's what we do. And we have one other member of our team on the panel here today. That's Nicole Davis. Hi, Nicole. Nicole is our watersheds coordinator. And so if you live in or around a river in Connecticut or in New York, you will probably see Nicole at some point, especially in the New Haven area where we've been a part of watershed plans for, I think, every river that's close by now. And then we have all of our guests. So I am going to let them all sort of do their own little introduction, but just briefly, we have Kim DiGiovanni, who's assistant professor of civil engineering at Quinnipiac University, and sort of the catalyst for this conversation in that it's her capstone course that led to this work that we'll be discussing today. Alongside her, we have John D Martinez, who was a student in the most recent capstone cohort or class. He is now graduated and out in the real world, as they say, although it looks very different than it usually does. So hi, John, welcome in. We have Mark Austin, who is the town engineer for the Town of Hamden, where both of these projects that we'll be discussing today are located. And we have Bill Brown. Bill is well known in the community as a guy who knows a lot about a lot of things, but he is also the director of the Eli Whitney Museum, which was one of the host sites for the projects we'll be discussing today. So with that, I want to, let's see, we'll start with Kim, and we'll sort of go in the same order I just introduced you. If you want to introduce yourselves and just say a few words about the organization that you're representing today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kim DiGiovanni. I'm a faculty member in the civil engineering program at Quinnipiac University. Some of you may know Quinnipiac. If you're local, you know the university, or some of you may just know us through the polls, the Quinnipiac polls. Our engineering program at Quinnipiac is fairly new. We had our first graduating class just a few years ago, but we're continuing to grow our program, and I'm happy to be here today to talk about some of our projects.
Awesome. Welcome, Kim. John.
Hi, my name is John D Martinez, and I'm a recent civil engineering graduate from Quinnipiac University. Now I'm a licensed engineer in training for the state of New Jersey.
Love it. Welcome, John. Let's go to Mark.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Austin. I'm the town engineer for the Town of Hamden and have been lucky enough to host some of these projects in the past and hope to continue in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. And Bill.
I'm Bill Brown. I'm the director of the Eli Whitney Museum, and I would say this site is the oldest of the historic connections to the Mill River. In 1657, a grist mill was built here, and it's been an active site ever since.
Wow, I actually didn't know that. That's incredible, though, and for anyone who's ever been to the Eli Whitney Museum, it's a really phenomenal place. And we do a lot of classes, hands-on stuff, at least in pre-COVID times. I'm not sure what programming is happening now, but it's a beautiful site as well. And so we're very glad to have Bill on the line with us today. I also just wanted to mention, I think it's nice to note the connections that sort of brought us together. I'm actually a Quinnipiac alum myself. But I was not in engineering, so here we are. And I actually met Kim the first time sitting side by side at the kickoff for the steering committee for the Mill River Watershed Plan at the Eli Whitney Museum. And it was before I worked for Save the Sound. And it was when Nicole had just started. And now there's like pictures of that up on our website, or there's a picture of that up on our website. And so just going through, I noticed that. It's just funny how these connections happen. So we're going to be discussing today a couple of different projects and the collaborations that made them possible in Hamden. And both of them are student-led projects that were part of the civil engineering capstone that Kim leads. And so as a way of starting us off here, I'd love, Kim, for you to just maybe give us some background on that capstone, what it entails, and how you sort of set all this up and what you ask of your students. Give us that picture.
Absolutely. So the capstone is really the culminating experience of the engineering curriculum at the university. Our civil engineering students have an opportunity to work on a design project, and that's the focus of the entire course, is working on the design project with a partner, with a client, community member. So some of the things that we look for when we're setting up these projects are, first of all, that it has an engineering design aspect, that our students are really going to get the opportunity to put the skills that they've learned through their courses, through their internships, and focus those on a project. We're very excited about projects that have the potential to have real impact, and working with community partners. And making sure that we have projects that are aligned with our students' interests as well, because I think that really gives the best benefit in the end when students are excited about the project that they're working on. So we typically have different projects for different engineering subdisciplines. So we have structural engineering projects, and we've worked with Mark Austin on several in the past, doing bridge designs, looking at snow loads on buildings, and things like that. We'll have different water resources and stormwater management, green infrastructure projects, like the one we'll be talking about that we worked with Bill Brown and you all at Save the Sound on this past semester. So we look for the engineering design aspect, the community partnership, and having the potential for that real impact to come out, and work on those projects together.
Yeah, I love hearing about that. The kind of hands-on learning, I think, is something that a lot of people on this panel are passionate about. So I do want to, just bring John in real quick, because as the student, as the other end of that, you have to take this course, right?
Yep.
So that isn't your choice. But once you get in, right, you did have a choice between projects. So I wonder if you can just tell us sort of what the capstone more broadly was like for you, and what it added to the experience at Quinnipiac.
So The course itself was a pretty good course because it was really flexible to students and whether they wanted to go into learning about structural engineering or environmental engineering or transportation. So I chose to go into the project I chose dealt with structural engineering, and that's what I really enjoyed the most. So that's why I thought it was a really good course, because you could choose which one you want to go into. And I'm glad that I chose that one because the experience that I took from it was a very good experience. And I got to meet with Mark, meet with the Town of Hamden Public Works, and the meetings that we've conducted to complete the project are very valuable experiences to me. And it was also very valuable working within the community as well and trying to make a project that could really make an impact and pretty much try and get it to actually be built. So that's why I thought that it was a really good experience.
Yeah, that's quite a legacy for a student, I think. If a project actually gets built and you've changed, this is something we talk a lot about on the ecological restoration team at Save the Sound. Actually, is we create lasting physical changes in the environments. One of the things that signifies our work on that team. So we know how good that feels. Now I mentioned before that we all sort of have these connections between us, and I want to name one of the things that helps bring sort of these disparate organizations, or these organizations in different sectors, not disparate, but we have municipality on the line, we have higher education, we have a private institution, we have students who are going out in the world, and then we have nonprofits like Save the Sound. So how do they all come together? Well, I think a big part of it, in thinking specifically about the projects we're talking about today, is watershed planning. A lot of the green infrastructure work that we do at Save the Sound is born sort of watershed planning. So Nicole, can you just give folks the overview of what the watershed planning process looks like, and how it has the potential, or how it catalyzes relationships like these and collaborations like these?
We've got that water as kind of the universal connector, I think, of everything that goes on around us. But these kind of specific groups really came together at the beginning of the Mill River Watershed Plan. And what's so great about the watershed planning effort is that people come in from all different perspective and aspects and interests on focusing on a river. Some people, they fish and they recreate on the river, others work right on the river, or like in the municipality's case, their work obviously incorporates some of the river as far as permits and MS4 and a lot of the engineering work that Mark does. And then with Quinnipiac University being right on the Mill River, it also kind of opened up this opportunity to get students engaged. And so kind of at that first meeting, which Bill was so kind to host, with this really fantastic site right on the Mill River, was really the first time I think most of the people in this group came together. And we were really interested in working with Kim because Quinnipiac University is right on the Mill River. The same way Bill was kind of a logical partner. They're both focused on education and kind of making people aware of their surroundings and how they fit into a community. And Bill works with a slightly younger age group, but so much of the work at the Eli Whitney Museum focuses on the river as kind of their neighbor and being a steward. And Quinnipiac and Save the Sound hadn't really worked together much in the past. And it was really awesome to say, look at you, you've got these fantastic sites. You have these students that are eager for experience. And then Mark came into the picture too, because a lot of the projects he was working on impacted the Mill River because most of the watershed is actually in Hamden. So, he was a great partner, and as Hamden starts to look at different ways to deal with stormwater and how they act as stewards of the river, it opened up a lot of doors. And just because I always like to do this in a presentation, because not everybody knows what a watershed is. So all land leads to a river or a stream. And so a watershed is where any drop of water falls and eventually makes its way into a river, either through a pipe, through surface flow, through a road, but all rain eventually flows into a river one way or another. And so that really is these small kind of connected areas, whether they're municipalities or bigger, it is all connected.
Yeah, thank you for level setting that for us. And it's really a cool image if you've never seen it, to look at the outline of one watershed and then separately look at the outline of another, and it's just a perfect puzzle piece, right? Because there's just a line, which is the watershed, right? Like there's a line, and on either side it'll go to a different river. It's a beautiful thing. So now I'd like to go to Mark and Bill, and because y'all were the hosts, so to speak, or the clients for these projects, and maybe if you can each describe the project. Mark, I'll ask you to describe the Pine Rock Park project. Obviously, Eli Whitney Museum is also in Hamden, but just give us an overview of what that project is, why you chose that site, and why why it was a yes to Quinnipiac and to Kim for taking this on.
Well, there's a much bigger relationship here. I mean, Quinnipiac exists within Hamden. We want to really encourage us. And Hamden has a lot of different, as with all towns, we have many different facilities and infrastructure that we're responsible for. We have over 60 bridges. We have many critical buildings that must be kept active during all conditions, especially during natural disasters, going back to the structural survey that not this past year, but the year before the students did. We're responsible for safe passage over roads, both during and after heavy rains. Again, we look at flooding capacities. We look at the water as it comes through the watershed to the Mill River. But we actually are split by two different watersheds. We have the Mill River and we have the West Rock. So actually we have two different watersheds. We have two different ways we look at it, but it's all the same way. And again, we also, as all municipalities, we're responsible for water quality through the municipal separate storm sewers. We have to watch the quality, and we want to make sure that the cleanest water gets to them, because the Mill River is part of our drinking water. And as with most other towns, we have very limited resources. We need to be very, strategic on how we spend our resources. And the program and the senior design programs help us by providing assistance for a very small program or a very small department. I'm one of 6 people. So some of our facilities are in need of evaluation, upgrades, and sometimes replacement. And due to various reasons, generally not eligible for grant funding, much like a very small bridge. We had a park bridge. And this park bridge was one that was identified by Public Works as showing some deterioration. The boards were getting old. The structure underneath the steel was rather rusted. Some of the fasteners were starting to get compromised through rust. And the abutments are starting to get old. They're not bad, as our design team looked at. We may be able to reuse the abutments because they're in good shape. But this is something that is really, this program is a win-win for absolutely everybody. It's a real-life design program for the students. So by giving them real-life problems as opposed to conceptual problems, they can actually see what it is, and it makes them better designers. For the town's standpoint, or in this case, the client, because we are their client in this case, they build a client relationship that they wouldn't otherwise have in an academic setting. Because normally in an academic setting, a professor says to him, you do this. Whereas when you're dealing with a client, we're here like, here's a problem, solve it. So it's a different relationship. And it's a much more effective cost to us because there's usually minimal cost. We provide some technical assistance. We managed to partner with UConn this year. I hired a boring contractor. We've worked with the Quinnipiac team. We take our time, we bring in other staff. We try to work together to give them the resources they need. We give them access to the sites. And it also increases collaboration with the university and promotes goodwill, because right now there are occasional factions that want to complain about the students. And I can tell you firsthand, working with the students over many years, that's not all students. That's the exception versus the rule. Most of these students are very professional. They're here for an education. They're not here to cause trouble. And they really want to be stewards to the town they belong to. Because even myself, even though I'm a graduate of UConn, you always feel very strongly about where you went to school. It's such a bond that you create over 4 years. We want this to be the best as possible. And as I tell every student, I want you to get the best grade possible, because the better grades they get, the better project we get, the better education they get. So it's a win-win for absolutely everybody. And we've been partnering for Quinnipiac for the past 3 years, both with this program, and also they have a presidential fellowship program, which we've been very lucky enough to be granted 2 different students, one of which went on, she wasn't quite sure what she wanted to do, and then ended up coming in, doing some bridge inspection for us. She ended up finding out that was a love for her, and she's now doing bridge inspection out in Rhode Island, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing. We helped that. She also ended up being the ASCE Student of the Year. So this is a chance where just by assisting her, and we had the gift of this wonderful young lady, we got a great product, and we really gave somebody some valuable experience that allowed them to really blossom as an engineer. And we've also partnered again with UConn this year for a couple others, and we'd like to continue. And as I tease the professors regularly, we'll be more than happy to take every project you guys want to give us.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a great overview. And I think talking about the many different facets in which it's beneficial, obviously one of them, depending on the project, is it's a win for the environment too. And in this case, this is a bridge project. John, I'm going to bring you in quickly here. What was it about, you had mentioned this to me, that there was an access issue or something about the access to this park, and we know that access to green spaces and access to natural spaces is really important for all of us, for our health and well-being. This bridge was actually, as far as this park is concerned, this is Pine Rock Park, correct?
Yes.
I'm not getting that wrong. Yeah, was fairly critical in terms of access to that space. So I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about that, and then Mark just did a great job of talking about the gifts that this project can bring to everyone involved, but also the things that you might learn about yourself and maybe what you're interested in and what you'd like to do. Was there any element of that in this for you, in this project? Did you discover anything about yourself or your interests in this?
Yeah, so first about the access with the Pine Rock Park. So where the bridge was located, it was located right next to where the entrance was. You could only enter the park 2 ways. You could either enter over the existing bridge that was there, or there's a parking lot behind the park. So basically the park is surrounded by a stream, and it was really critical when we were going into the planning for the project, because if that bridge was going to be shut down, then everybody would have to go around to access the park, and it would be a little bit of an inconvenience for the public. So what we considered looking at was about 50 feet upstream, there was already existing abutments that were on each end of the stream, but it looked like there was an older bridge that was there, and it kind of got demolished and it wasn't there anymore. So all you were able to see was abutments. So what me and the project team considered was thinking about, would we be able to put another bridge here while we can keep the existing bridge that's still in condition for the public to use, and could we design a newer bridge? It's 50 feet north of where the existing one is, or are we going to have to just reuse the existing abutments that are on the bridge that are currently supporting the existing bridge that is there right now? So those were a couple factors that we looked into. And then as we were getting more into the project, we started looking at, okay, so if we need to go 50 feet upstream and use those older existing abutments, what will we need to do to try and make new paths for people to enter? Because the existing bridge that's there right now already has walking paths, and it already has abutments that were already inspected by town inspectors, and they could already be reused, as Mark previously said before. So it was pretty challenging to try and figure out what we would be able to do, but in the end, we decided to just reuse the existing abutments, even though it may take a little while for the public to be able to access using that bridge because it'll be under construction. But the reason why we couldn't use the older existing abutments that were 50 feet upstream from the existing bridge was because it would create too many environmental impacts, and that's something that we really want to avoid because we would have to cut down more trees, we would have to pave more walkways, and also another thing would be that it was really close to another property line that was north of the park, so it would really interfere with somebody's property, which is something that really needs to be avoided as well when working on a public project like that. So what we ended up doing was just using the existing abutments on the existing bridge, and we just came up with a new design for the a wood steel combination for the frame with the wooden decking, 3 long beams that are 50 feet long, and wooden decking and railings on the side was what we came up with designs in AutoCAD and SAP 2000. So that was what we did throughout the project. It was an interesting experience because we had to try and, it was a lot of problem solving. We had to try and figure out what would work best. And we also looked into cost. How much would it cost? What would be a cheaper option? Would we be able to save time if we do this way? So there was a lot that went into it that I really was able to take out of in the end. And what I learned about myself was that everything going into these projects is important. You have to take into consideration the stream as well, because when it floods, we had to look into the flooding. How would this be able to, if there's a storm, would it be, and the flooding occurs, would it reach up to the bridge? Would it damage any of the decking? Would any weather affect it? So we had to look at other factors as well. And I also learned that not only did this involve structural engineering and looking at deflections on the beams and modeling in SAP 2000 and looking at what size beams we would use, but also we had to look at it in a construction sort of way as well and estimate like how much it would cost. So all different factors went into this project, not just structural engineering. There was everything that you could pretty much think about because you had to take into account pretty much technical issues and also non-technical issues as well, like the weather and how the public can access the park and things like that. So that's what I was able to take away from it.
Yeah, a lot of complexity to it.
Yeah,
and it sounds like you thrived in the complexity. That's great. And you can also see how much work they did that Mark and team did not have to do at that site, or simply had to assist with in this case.
And one of the parts of the, just to add to what the young gentleman did here is it also showed in engineering decision making, which is a huge part of the engineering design process. The professors can teach very, very well the design process, but when you're evaluating alternatives, that's a little harder for them to teach. So a real life project really gives them that opportunity, and they did a really good job with it.
Yeah. Kim, do you want to say anything about that? You were just invoked in a way.
I don't have anything to add. I mean, it's fantastic project.
Yeah. All right, awesome. Then let's move to the other one. And this is the one that Save the Sound was involved with directly, but Bill and the Eli Whitney Museum were the client here. So Bill, what can you tell us about the site for this project, what problem you were facing, and why this was a yes when Kim approached you?
Yes. So the Eli Whitney Museum is a small nonprofit. We're an education entity, and I've been here for 30 years, and so I've supervised the development of much of the site, and that means that I've rehabbed some of the buildings and changed the access and other things. And I've worked as a longtime partner with the Regional Water Authority, which shares some of the management of the site. And the interesting part of that experience is that the problems that I now see that we could do something about, we could have actually taken care of over the last 30 years if the engineers who helped us get the site plan settled had said simply, wait, there is an option, you could build a rain garden, but nobody said that because they knew that we were poor and practical and needed to get the job done as simply as possible. So we conscientiously attempted to understand our responsibilities to the town and the regulations and the river. And yet there were options that nobody mentioned simply because they may have seemed at the time too refined. But ironically, some of the major interventions that we would like to undertake, we could have done for a fraction of the expense early on. So this was an opportunity for, first off, through following the Save the Sound survey, I learned that there were these options that we should have considered earlier on. And the relationship with Quinnipiac was a way to put into practical terms what it would take to reduce the runoff from the site that diminishes the quality of the Mill River. And so this was a chance to go back and do better things that we missed in the past.
Yeah, and so it is a rain garden, correct? That
yeah.
Where is it on the property, and what's the problem?
Well, the problem is that we're in a position that's created by the history of the site. The dam creates an elevation of on one side, and on the other side, this is a low point in an early low point. This is the tidal level of the Mill River. And it means that our parking has always had the difficulty of absorbing rainfall. And so there's always been some, not a massive amount, but some runoff that gets to the Mill River and takes with it some of the sand and other debris that is on our site. And what we're looking for is a way to reduce that impact that we have on the Mill River. And there are other impacts that are associated both with Armory Street and the Whitney Avenue itself. And as we looked narrowly at one of the core parking areas, but we at the same time were cognizant of the whole site and how we can do things better. And there is a peculiar history. There were 18 buildings have come and gone here in the last 250 years. And so the site is dense and it doesn't absorb rain. And what this would do would be to go back in history to where it would have been literally in the 1800s, where it would have had less runoff into the Mill River.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for that. That's great. And I think since we don't have a student who actually worked on the project, I think what I'll do now is give it to Nicole, just to talk very briefly about, okay, so what is a rain garden and why does it matter? Why would it help solve this problem?
So the Eli Whitney Museum, like a lot of historically developed properties, especially those that have been used for industrial purposes, are there's a lot of pavement and a lot of solid ground. So there's really no room for water to kind of sink into the ground naturally, which would have happened pre-development. And as you think about these sites and what our natural ecosystem does, when rain hits the ground and soaks in, it gives pollutants and nutrients and sediments all a chance to kind of soak into the ground and be collected into the soil before the water reaches the river. And the parking lot where this project is set it's almost like a bathtub. It's below like Bill said, it's the low point. It's below Whitney Avenue. It's below the dam. So there's a lot of places for water to run off and collect into this site. And so by converting part of the parking lot into a rain garden, we're basically mimicking nature and creating a natural system where the water is going to soak into the ground rather than just kind of run off into a storm drain and go through a pipe. And with this particular site, because Bill said there's a lot of complexity with the number of buildings that have been there and how it's been used, it's kind of a hybrid between a rain garden and a bioswale. So with a rain garden, you're usually just thinking of a small sunken garden that'll hold the water while it soaks in. And with this system, it would require more excavation and then kind of backfilling it with gravel and something that kind of creates a little bit more room, kind of chambers to hold the water, which is then planted on top. So you've got the plants inside the garden that are kind of filtering out nutrients and sediments, but then the water is kind of seeping into the ground and holding in this area kind of while the storm passes or while the water levels are high in the river. And then it gives it a chance to kind of slowly release into the ground. And water entering a river through groundwater is a lot cleaner than something that comes over surface flow or through a pipe, obviously.
Yeah.
The other thing to think about too is that these plants also create native habitat, which is really fantastic in an area like the Eli Whitney Museum, which is right next to East Rock Park, which is identified as an important bird area. So by using plants, it'll create kind of pollinator habitat, nesting areas and places that will attract more birds and bees. That really just kind of expands an ecosystem that's already thriving.
Awesome. Yeah, and presumably the reason it had to be sort of a hybrid is because, like you and Bill just mentioned, the ground there is more dense, more compacted. And, you know, when we think about, you know, what we look for in rain garden sites, right, we're looking for sandier soil or well draining soil. So yeah, those are all important considerations. Kim, do you want to add anything about the student team that took this on and anything they encountered that was surprising or challenging for them?
Yeah, absolutely. There were definitely a number of challenges that the students experience working on the site. And as it's been mentioned, the site is complex site. We are close to the river, so there are things to think about in terms of the infiltration capacity of the site right where it is. The history and the background of the site in terms of what types of soil are underneath it there, as you've discussed. And I think it points to the real value of having worked directly with Bill. He was able to bring a lot of lived experience about the site to their awareness and to our awareness as we were working on the design to come up with the rain garden design ultimately for the site. And I'd also, I mean, as he mentioned, he's been there for 30 years and he was listing off for us, you know, I remember when the site flooded this year or different things like that. I'd also add just to as a real testament to the adoption of green stormwater infrastructure practices over the years. Bill mentioned, you know, if we had the opportunity 30 years ago to do something differently, and I think often hindsight's 20/20, right? But really, if you think about kind of the history of low impact development and green infrastructure, especially in the United States, LID was adopted in Prince George's County, Maryland in the 1990s. And that was really the basis for the adoption of green infrastructure in the United States. So to be able to see it gaining such wider adoption across the municipalities and large cities adopting it as part of like their primary means of managing stormwater. Philadelphia and New York City both have major commitments as large local cities, just as examples. So it's exciting to see that now and to be able to be a part of the design for this local site for the Eli Whitney Museum.
Yeah, we're very excited to see green infrastructure taking off like that too. I know, you know, the city of New Haven has 200 plus bioswales around the city now. And there's dozens of rain gardens, including actually one or two that we've done up in Hamden too. So it's starting to get out there. and really starting to gain some traction. And we'd love to see other municipalities really start to pick it up in a big way. And so, Mark, can you? I'm gonna go to Mark, and then I'm gonna go maybe back to Nicole or Bill, probably to talk about where the project stands now and what's next. Like, what are the next steps to actually make? So the students ended up with designs, right? So where does the project go from there?
That's more up to the individual site owner. But when it comes to green infrastructure, the importance of these is that this is actually the second one that we've had senior design students work on. They actually evaluated 2 of our largest plazas last year in conjunction with the Regional Water Authority. The Mill River is a water supply, so we want the highest quality water supply that can go there, and it comes out of our drainage systems more often than not. So we're very supportive of green infrastructure. And this is really, really a common problem. Is Bill made the comment earlier that had I known this 30 years ago, and he's right, because most of the time it wasn't adopted early. It was looked at very, very suspiciously. It was looked at as questionable quality. Now that there's been so many studies and so many supporting pieces with it, you're not only just going from a hardware side of it, which would be infiltrators, detention ponds, and other things. Now that's the quantity side. Now we're going to the quality side, and we're realizing that nature does a lot of the work for us. Instead of using a swirled separator or an oil water separator, you can attack it even earlier, and the plants will do it for you. And as long as you keep those plants healthy and well maintained and you don't let the invasives in, it does a great job. So, and also from a municipal standpoint, this is a relatively new technology. It's been around for thousands of years. Water comes off of a field, it goes through grass, it filters it, and end up with a higher quality. I mean, it's been that way since time started. But when it comes to an engineered side of it, we always felt that the best water was just let it go. Now we're realizing we need to retain it, we need to infiltrate it. We now know the larger ecology of this. So instead of just getting rid of water, now we have to treat it on site. And Hamden, like a lot of old mill towns, which we are, and we're in an old area is that we're looking at redevelopment. So this is where this design team was able to look at an old site, in this case, the oldest in town, and make something even better. Whereas I'm looking at plazas that have been around since the 1960s, 1950s. Now we're trying to convince the owners, hey, you want to do some development? How about using these methods? By the way, go look at the Eli Whitney Center and do what wonderful things they've done. Go look at some of the other sites that we're looking at. We're chasing grants with, of all places, to Save the Sound. And Yale University, we're in the process of chasing a secondary grant because the first one got denied, not including the one that we're looking to put in Town Center Park, which is we're just finalizing an agreement between Save the Sound, who is the grant holder, and us, who are going to be the builders and the owners of this green garden. And it's going to be right in the Town Center Park, and it's right next to the middle school, so it'll also serve as an educational facility.
Exactly.
We're finalizing that, and this is a great collaboration where the schools thought of it first, say, hey, it would be nice to have something here to teach about. We ended up chasing one grant, got a little itty bitty one, chased a second one, got denied, chased a different one, and we were approved. So it's not always the simplest process in the world.
Yeah.
We get there, and this collaboration really is made for a much stronger way things. And now, teaching it through the universities, these young engineers have a much better education, and they can get out and make a difference in the future.
Yeah.
It's a win for everybody.
The education is a through line here. It's a beautiful thing. Bill, do you want to talk for a second about what you'd like to see happen next or what the next step is in your view at the Eli Whitney Museum?
Yeah, I'd like to go back to a point that Mark made, that one of his rain garden projects comes on a school site. And when you're teaching children, you don't want to have to teach children about the environment by telling them all the bad things that are happening. Bad things are happening. You want to be able to give them an opportunity to be part of something good that will reduce the bad impacts. And so I think what's nice about the Save the Sound project is it's distributed opportunities for activism. That is, instead of having sort of passive, oh, well, you could reduce this, you could do that. No, here's something you can do, and it's going to have a long life that will be constructive that whole life. And that's why we're willing to pull up the trees that are out there and dig deep enough until we get to the point that we can, as Mark points out, process the water on site. And there's a sort of happy coincidence that yet another mistake I've made over my 30 years. We planted ash trees out there, and those are in danger, and we're looking at what it will take to, we'd love not to have to get rid of them, but it's probably better to remove the trees and start again and get to the project. Will we get to it this year? This is a particularly difficult year. I don't think we'll get to it this year, but we would not have asked we would not have asked the question we asked of Kim's students if we didn't want to honor the answer. So it will get built when when resources are a little bit more fluid than they are now.
I love that. Thank you, Bill. And so, yeah, we did have a question come through about challenges that climate change brings into this equation. So I want to go to Kim and John on that, and just John, were there any elements of your project or anything that you took into consideration related to climate change or changing climate, and how the conditions maybe that this project would have to would face? I don't know if that was a complete sentence.
What we I believe when we first started the project, there was when we had our first site visit, there was actually like a lot of snow where where the bridge was. So like we had tape measures. We were trying to just take measurements of how long everything was, how wide the abutments were. But pretty much like from a design sort of perspective, we just tried to come up with the best design as we possibly could, regarding what the weather was going to be. But the challenging part was trying to go out to the site and try and get all the measurements, and because every time we went to the site, we always thought we had all the information we needed, for all the general dimensions and measurements. And we went to go into the design software, and we would say, oh man, we have to get this, we forgot that little part. So we would have to try and go back or figure out a way of how we could estimate what that would be. But in general, we just tried to come up with the best design we possibly could.
Yeah, all factors considered, right? And I know Mark just put in the chat, that climate change changes the threshold of water storage you're thinking about, at least in the Northeast, right? That's the impact, or one of the impacts of climate change that we'd expect. Kim, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, absolutely. In the Northeast United States, climate change is going to be a big factor in our future engineering designs. And we're projected to have more rainfall at higher intensities, and including those types of considerations in design, I think, is something important for moving forward. So one way the students did that for their stormwater management project, for the green infrastructure project, was to use projections of future climate scenarios in their design. So typically they'd use a design storm that's based on historical records. And we're recognizing that we're seeing shifts in those patterns of precipitation. So the future projections can give us a little bit more of an idea of what things might be in the future. So we use the Northeast Regional Climate Center's predictions for what we're going to experience.
That's great. I think, I don't think that the impact on engineers' work is something that's talked about a lot with respect to climate change, but y'all have to really take that on. I mean, that's when we think about our roadways and the infrastructure that we rely on to live and to move around, it's got to hold up. And, we don't want to have to rebuild everything 10 years from now, 20 years from now, right? We want it to last. And so building those considerations in up front is real important. So we have only a few minutes left here. And I know there was another question that came through about the biggest obstacles to getting rain gardens and bioswales installed. I think I'll just say quickly, one is having willing sites and owners who are excited about having it happen. Another is funding, sort of as always. And there's probably several others that Nicole could speak to. Maybe we'll have to do another one on that kind of the challenges we're facing. But installation, yeah, that's a good point. Mark said it may be adopted by the current owner, but often the future owners too. All right, so in closing, I want to give our esteemed guests a chance to sort of tell us how we can help forward the work, or what in the spirit of collaboration and community, what we can do collectively, the people on this call, to contribute to your work. So Kim, do you want to go first?
Sure, absolutely. We are always looking for potential projects for our students, whether it ends up being in a capstone class or in a technical elective class as a project for a course. So I'm going to put my email address in the chat, and absolutely feel free to reach out to me about potential project ideas.
That's great. Yeah, Mark is very excited about this. I think he has an endless supply of projects over there. Mark, do you want to say anything about how folks can help you, or other than giving you students to work on projects?
It's a combination of a couple things. Right now, no matter where you are in a municipality, our biggest hurdle is funding. No one wants to see their taxes going up, and costs are just really on the tipping point where a lot of people are unemployed and costs are going up, taxes are going up, and it's hurting everybody. So the biggest hurdle that a municipality has, almost regardless of where you are, is how do you fund various initiatives? And these don't necessarily need to be high-funded initiatives. Sometimes it could be as simple as going to a group like the Save the Sound, the Mill River, the West River, any of these groups, volunteer. Go to a stream walk. When you have, and mine is you have a pet, pick up after them. You don't think of these little itty bitty things, but it makes such a big difference on water quality. Is don't allow open soil. I'm a gardener. When I have my garden, I want to make sure I keep that soil in my garden. So you don't want to open up your soils. So when it rains, it all runs off because you just spent all that effort, all that time, all that money on fertilizer. You want to keep it there.
Yeah.
There's little itty bitty things you could do as a homeowner, as a gardener, as just a regular person to try to improve those. And one of the biggest ones we could tell you is use these trails, use these parks, go walk in them, fall in love with them. Because when people care about these things, they want to see them last.
That's fantastic. I couldn't have said that better myself. That's beautiful. Thank you, Mark. John, do you want to say anything?
Overall, to take away from the project, I thought it was a very valuable experience, and I'll always remember the things that I did to try and complete the project, whether it was working on design aspects, trying to figure out different dimensions on whatever the bridge was, and then the design, all the design aspects, and then into the construction aspects as well, looking at costs, material costs, labor costs, and all the other factors that go into the project. I thought it was a very valuable experience to understand how the project was completed from the beginning when we started to the end, when we had the design and when we presented it at the end in the presentations.
Yeah, and I'll offer a little plug here. You're a gun for hire at this point, right?
Yeah.
You're out there. Yeah. So engineering firms and municipalities, be on the lookout. These students coming out of Quinnipiac have some real experience here. Bill, how can folks get involved or help with your work right now?
I think Mark's point about use the trails, use the parks. The parks need constituents that will convince municipalities that too is an essential part of the infrastructure, and that of course sewers and roads and bridges are important, but so is access to nature. We've de facto become the north entrance to the East Rock Park, and it's a very proud role that we are happy to take on. And so come for a bird walk.
Yeah, you do see a lot of birders out at the Eli Whitney Museum. It's a great spot for that. All right, well, we're a little over time. Nicole, do you have any final words for us?
I think everyone did a really good job reminding people that they're stewards of where they are, and to continue to support organizations like Bill really does go a long way, and by supporting our work.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're grateful for all of these collaborations. We're excited to be working with Mark and the Town of Hamden on the Town Center Park project. We're excited to keep working with all these folks, really, and with all of you. So if you're interested in working with us, feel free to reach out anytime as well. That can even just be info@savethesound.org. But reach out to any of us and let's see if there's things we can do together. If you want to support us in another way, you can go to www.savethesound.org/donate. All of this work, especially right now, is powered by our members. It's only $25 a year to be a member of Save the Sound, but it's powered by our members and by donors. So we appreciate every little bit of that. Right now, all organizations and municipalities and everyone is having to figure out what the future looks like. So we appreciate any support in that way. And with that, I just want to thank Mark, John, Kim, Nicole, and Bill for being a wonderful panel, for spending this time with us. And I want to thank everyone else in the room, in this virtual room, for being here with us as well. This was a wonderful hour, and this recording will be up in the future for you to see. So look forward to seeing everyone on the trails, hopefully, and out around the sound. So thanks, everyone.